Shalom. This week we are reading Parashat Eikev, and these are the opening verses of the Torah portion. And it will be because you will heed these ordinances and keep and perform them, that Hashem, the Lord your God, will keep for you the covenant and the kindness that He swore to your forefathers, and He will love you and bless you and multiply you. He will bless the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your soil, your grain, your wine, and your oil, the offspring of your cattle and the choice of your flocks and the land which He swore to your forefathers to give you. You shall be blessed above all peoples. There will be no sterile male or barren female among you or among your livestock. And the Lord will remove from you all illness and all the evil diseases of Egypt which you knew. He will not set upon you, but He will lay them upon all your enemies. And you shall consume all the peoples which the Lord your God gives you. You shall not spare them, nor shall you worship their gods, for that would be a snare for you. The first verse of this Torah portion, verse 12 of chapter 7 in the book of Devarim, is typically translated as we just read it, as, and it shall be, or and it shall come to pass. This shall be the reward when, or because, you hearken to these ordinances and you observe and perform them. But which of these words that we just read is the translation of the word Eikev, which figures in this verse, for which the portion is named, as this verse reads, V'haya, and it shall be Eikev, second word, here translated as when or because. Actually, the word Eikev would be impossible to translate in this verse in any way that would make sense, because the word Eikev actually means heel, H-E-E-L, as in the heel of a human foot. Hence the tradition of our sages that there is an allusion here, something being referred to in this verse, an underlying theme. The verse alludes to those particular mitzvot, those commandments that a person tends to tread underfoot, that one somehow inadvertently, consciously or unconsciously, shows contempt for, sells short, takes advantage of, or doesn't quite treat seriously with enough respect. Why? Maybe just because. We are exhorted, be as cautious with regard to the fulfillment of an easy mitzvah as you are with regards a serious mitzvah, for you do not know the reward of the commandments. This is a teaching of our sages. In other words, maybe something that most people would consider to be secondary or minor might actually be considered and weighed as very important in the eyes of the Almighty. So don't tread on me screams that particular commandment, but what or which commandments are being referred to here? That remains unclear. Perhaps it differs for each person. Perhaps the warning reads that which you consider trivial, well, just maybe everything in your life is depending on that. So if you'll keep all of the commandments of the Torah to do them, also those easy commandments, alluded to by the word Eikev, which on account of some sort of contempt people tend to trample underfoot, then the Holy One, blessed be He, will relate to us by the same token, and He will love you, etc., etc. Now, our Torah portion continues with the children of Israel still camped on the eastern side of the Jordan, and Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, is continuing with his farewell to his people. The whole nation is listening to his general review of the events that transpired during Israel's desert sojourn. And he's also speaking concerning the commandments they received at Mount Sinai. Soon the new leadership is going to be bringing the people to the other side of the Jordan, where they will be conquering the land of Canaan and inheriting it. The main ingredient of Moshe's efforts now to prepare his people for this is his concentrating on strengthening the nation's spiritual foundation, because that is what will determine the success of the wars that they must wage, as well as their continued prosperity and their development as the nation of Israel in their own land. That's the background as our Torah portion opens, but I would like to focus, especially after this unusual opening of this allusion to something that is just not really considered to be important by people that we are not really treating correctly. I want to focus on one particular verse, one particular concept that we find in this week's Torah portion that's now introduced by Moshe. You see, last week in Parashat Eikev, we spoke about the commandment of loving Hashem. And we find that in the first paragraph of the Shema in chapter 6, last week's Torah portion. And we spoke extensively last week about the love aspect of the relationship that we have with God. In Parashat Eikev, this week's Torah portion, Moshe introduces the concept of fearing God. And he seems to be distilling the entire Torah, Israel's entire obligation, into this one concept. Thus we read in chapter 12 in verse 10, "And now, O Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you? Only to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways and to love him, to worship Hashem, the Lord your God, with all your heart and with all your soul, to keep the commandments of the Lord and the statutes which I command you this day for your good." So, being afraid of God, is that a good thing? Apparently it is, but it doesn't necessarily mean being afraid of being zapped or of being eternally damned. What does it mean to be afraid of God? It's a different kind of fear. And though we are accustomed to rather condescendingly assuming that it's a lower level for a person to fear God than it is to love God, fearing Hashem is actually quite similar to loving him. So our sages instruct us that the fear of God, cultivating and sincerely working on this feeling and acquiring it on a deep level, they tell us that that's the fulfillment of a positive commandment, a mitzvah taseh. Just like ahavat Hashem, the positive commandment of loving Hashem, yirat Hashem, the positive commandment of fearing God. Last week we spoke about loving Hashem, and our sages teach us that the two, love and fear, are interchangeable, that they both originate at the same source. That must be the explanation of our verse, which states these words in the same breath, "And now, O Israel, what does Hashem your God demand of you, ask of you? Only to fear Hashem your God, to walk in all his ways, and to love him, and to worship Hashem your God with all your heart and with all your soul." In his great code, the illustrious Rambam, Maimonides, puts these two things together. And he even explains how to achieve them. He says, by focusing and meditating on Hashem's great works and his creation, a person can achieve these attributes of love and fear of God. Now, when you talk like this, a lot of people out there are saying right now, well, I'm way past that. Or they're saying, well, I don't want to just merely fear God like a little child. I want to love him. But is it a small thing then to truly be in awe of God's greatness? Is it a nightmare vision of reality? Always being afraid? Or maybe is the nightmare vision when we don't fear Hashem? So who's not living in fear today? You're not afraid of something or everything? In countless teachings, what our great sages are after, trying to get us to understand, is that fearing Hashem is not a great level of achievement for a person, but rather it's a basic foundation of being a human being, and without it, our lives are a nightmare. So, in one particularly exemplary teaching we find, sages state, and it's very, very cryptic, they say, everything is in the hands of heaven except the fear of heaven. Okay? So the meaning is actually quite clear. Everything in our lives is subject to divine providence, except for one little detail. Whether or not a person will realize that everything in our lives is subject to divine providence. That is, divine providence leaves it up to the free choice of a person whether or not to even be connected and to even see and to even believe. So all of the students of the Holy Baal Shem Tov on this topic, They all teach that essentially this verse, and now, O Israel, what does Hashem ask of you but to fear Him? They all teach that this is simply very good advice because, you see, as Rabbi Nachman explains, a specific measure of fear is assigned to each one of us at birth. We come into the world with a package of fear. It's a fear quota, and there's no way around it. You were born to fear a certain amount. The only question is, what will you fear? Terrorists, germs, lions, tigers, bears, financial collapse. The verse is urging a person to free himself from the overwhelming fear of being, from the overwhelming fear of this world, by binding ourselves to the highest supernal roots of fear, of awe, of balance. This world is full of fear. It's rooted in the very foundation of creation. A mouse is afraid of a cat, and a cat is afraid of a dog, and a dog is afraid of a person, and so on. But the purpose of all of this is for a human being, through all of these garbs of what the Torah really teaches are false fears, to reach the highest and purest fear, and then to accept the responsibility that we have in our relationship with Hashem. That's why the second portion of the Shema is in this week's Torah portion as well, which is the Kabbalat HaMitzvot, accepting our obligation of the commandments. And fearing Hashem means, in this light, I am not afraid of anything else. So fear of Hashem is everything, in fact. That's what it says in Psalms 111, verse 10. The beginning of knowledge is the fear of God. And our lives are depending on it, but it's cloaked in the garments of various types of fear in creation. But one who looks and sees what is hiding behind all of these cloaks finds the inner dimension, the pure and holy and cleansing aspect of true awe, fear, reverence, which frees a person from all the extraneous fears that are but trappings of the real thing, part of the nightmare vision, so that we can truly soar in this world and be attached to godliness without being chained by the everyday excuses of fear, which frankly is just an illusion. So you see, even the commandment to fear Hashem is an aspect of His love, because this is the true first and last freedom. This is a gift. This is the ultimate aspect of His compassion and love. This get-out-of-jail-free card, this advice of fearing Hashem, is the key to really being a free person in this world. And one more thing, Yira, Yud Resh Aleph Hey, the letters that spell fear, the same letters that spell Re'iyah, seeing. The more a person sees the truth of Hashem in life, the more that person can attain the true attribute of fear. And the more a person attains the true attribute of fear, the more one sees Hashem throughout every day of his life.